Good morning, folks. This recording is for Pre-Algebra Chapter 6, Lesson 9, Applications of Rational Numbers. We will be doing word problems today. Aren't you excited? All right. So, an event planner has $2,000 budget for an event. She spends 32% of the budget on chair rental, 0.4% of the budget on food, 1/5 on door prizes, and $160 on decorations. Which part did she spend the most money of the budget? The least. Okay, so there are several ways to do this, but all of them involve converting to one form, either percent, decimal, or fraction, and then compare. So I'm going to convert them all to a percent. All right, well, we already have 32% of the chairs, so that one's taken care of. 0.4 on the food, though, and remember, this is a decimal. This isn't 0.4%, because actually that would be a really tiny percent. It'd be less than 1% of the amount she spent on food. So this is actually a decimal. But to turn a decimal into a fraction, you just move it 2 places to the right, and you get 40%. So already we know she spent more on food than she spent on the chairs. All right, the door prizes was 1/5. Well, if you divide 1/5, 1 divided by 5, you're going to get 0.2, which is a decimal, and then move it 2 places to the right, and you have 20%. And then $160 on decorations. We need to figure out what percentage that is. Well, if I divide 160 by 2,000, because it's the percentage times the whole, which is $2,000, how much we have total, equals a part, which is 160, we're going to get 0.08, which when you turn into a decimal turns into 8%. So she spent more on food, then chairs, then door prizes, then decorations. Kind of makes sense. Food important. All right. So the most amount of the budget was spent on food. The least amount was spent on decorations. There we go. Now again, you could have converted this to fractions, but fractions are kind of hard to compare. You could have converted this to decimals easily, and it would have probably been just as easy as converting it to decimals, considering you could easily turn the 32% by just moving it over twice and getting 0.32. This was a 0.4. We already knew that was a 0.2, and this ended up being 0.08 just based on that down there. All right, so probably not converting it to fractions. That probably would be like the long way around, but converting to decimals or percentages in this case is going to make things easier for you to compare. All right. A copier makes 225 copies in 5 minutes. Another copier makes 20% fewer copies in 3 minutes. Which copier is faster? So, use unit rates to determine which is faster. The first copier makes 225 copies in 5 minutes. So how many copies does it make in 1 minute? Well, that's dividing. Copies divided by minutes is going to give you 45 copies per minute. Copier 2 makes 20% fewer. So this is kind of like a discount. So you could first, and remember from yesterday's video, from the video before this, from Chapter 6, Lesson 8, 6-8, you can do it 2 ways. You can find the percentage, the 20% fewer, and then subtract that discount from the total to get the number of copies. Or you can say that they make 20% fewer, which means they're making 80% of the number of copies. All right? And the second copier makes 80% of the first. I like doing it the second way. I always have. It's easier. It's less math. You just do it once and you get the answer. Okay? And again, doing 100 minus 20 to get 80 is a lot easier to do mentally. And again, if you're trying to go fast because you have test prep, you don't have a calculator, it's easier to do something in your head like 100 minus 80, or excuse me, 100 minus 20 to get 80, as opposed to like, all right, I gotta do 20% of that, and then I gotta do subtraction. Okay, I prefer the second way, but it's your choice if the first way makes more sense. Okay, so 80% of 225 copies equals the number of copies, which is 180 copies in 3 minutes. Remember, we still have a rate. This is how many copies it makes in 3 minutes. To figure out how many copies it makes in 1 minute, we're going to divide, and we're going to get 60 copies per minute. So, the second copier is faster, and it's faster by several copies. That's what, 15 copies? That's pretty crazy. It's 15 copies faster. All right. All right, estimation can be useful for tips, sales tax, and sales price to figure out if you can afford what's going on. Use the table on page 326, which is that table right there, to help you estimate. Change the percentage into either a decimal or a fraction that is close to the true value of the percentage. Okay, so if you've got 10%, you can use either of those. If you've got 33.3%, you should use one of those, which means you should probably, I'll make this a little neater, you should probably use the fraction if you ever have a repeating decimal. So just because your calculator can't handle this, eventually your calculator has to stop. And actually, eventually you have to stop. So whenever you have a repeating decimal, always use the fraction, folks. Always use the fraction. The fraction means the exact same thing as the repeating decimal, but is easier to multiply by, because you all know how to multiply by fractions. So please, 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 when you're dealing with repeating decimals, don't use the repeating decimal. Use a fraction. Okay, next slide. All right. I got a little ahead of myself. There we go. Oop. And then I went too far back. Okay. We'll just leave it right there. Okay, so use the nutrition label for the macaroni on the left. Oh, it's on the right. My bad. On the right, and the percent daily value column gives the percent of the reference daily intake, or RDI, in one serving. The RDI for calcium is 1,000 milligrams. About how many milligrams of calcium are in one serving of this macaroni? So, you're going through your day. You need about 1,000 milligrams of calcium, which isn't a ton, guys. It's about the size of a sugar cube, maybe. Less than that. Less than that. Way less than that. It's like half the size, less than that. It's probably like a tenth of the size of a sugar cube. It's not a ton of calcium. At least if you were just like, oh, I'm going to eat my calcium in one go. It tastes like calcium powder, which, guys, it tastes like chalk. Don't ever do it. It tastes horrible. You're going to be coughing up like white dust forever because, yeah, calcium in its pure form is disgusting. Just drink your milk. Okay, so anyway, we need to know that we need 1,000 milligrams a day to get the amount of calcium our body needs. This macaroni says it provides 23% of the calcium needed in your everyday life, which again is 1,000 milligrams. Well, if we're going to estimate, because it says about, 23% is very close to, and if you go back to the previous page, 23% is very close to 25%, which is right there, right? So we can either use a fourth or 0.25 when doing the math. All right? So again, 23% is very close to 25%, which is the same as 1/4 or 0.25. Now, if you have a calculator, use 0.25. If you don't have a calculator, use 1/4. All right? Now, I'm going to show you how easy it is to multiply fractions with just using 1/4. So we're going to take the number of milligrams of calcium we need a day, which is 1,000. We're going to multiply by a fourth, and we're going to get 1,000 times 1, which is 1,000, over 1 times 4, which is 4, and we're just going to divide simply. Remember, the top number always goes in the house, and there we go. You're going to get 250 milligrams of calcium from the serving of macaroni cheese. All right, last question. A computer is on sale for 15% off the regular price of $399.95. After the discount, an 8.25% sales tax is added. Is $350 enough to buy the computer with the discount and the sales tax? Justify your answer. Okay, so again, there's a few ways you can go about this, but more than likely, well, excuse me, not more than likely, but you have to take care of the discount first. So we're going to find the discount of 15%. Well, according to our table, bam, there it is, 10% is closest to 15%. Now, you could go up to 20%. That would probably be just as easy because whatnot, but you don't want to overestimate a discount, because if you overestimate a discount, then you will actually be paying more than what your estimation is. So it's better to round down on a discount and round up on a sales tax. So if you're ever trying to figure out how much to take off of what you're paying, round down, because you could always be paying more. And if you round down the percentage, it means you're paying for more of what's actually there. Whereas if you overestimate the discount, your estimate will be lower than the actual discount. And you don't want that to happen, because it's better to factor in that you've planned on paying more for something and just get the nice surprise that you're actually paying less. All right, that's just word of the wise. Always overestimate your sales tax, underestimate your discount. Okay, because if nothing else, you'll get more back than you're determining that you actually were. Okay, so we're going to round down for the percentage discount. And again, you can either do 10% of the price and then subtract that amount from the original price, or you can say, well, if I'm not paying for 10% of this computer, I'm actually paying for 90% of this computer, and do 90% of the original cost and get the final answer immediately. And you know what? That's what I like to do. Again, look at the previous video if this isn't making too much sense to you. So there you go. See the last video. All right, so I'm going to do 90% of it, and I'm actually going to round up. This is only 5 cents difference. It's not going to be a big deal. Rounding up on this is not that big of a deal. Okay? Again, we're estimating. So 90% of $400, remember I'm estimating, is $360. So automatically, I'm already $10 over, and that doesn't even include the tax. I'm going to be paying more for this computer, 8.25% of it already. So just by putting in the discount, I still can't afford the computer, let alone with the tax. And for those doubting Thomases out there, not to say that a Thomas is normally somebody who doubts, but for those people who don't believe me, I'm going to go ahead and do it with the exact 15% and show you that after even the sales tax, you still can't afford it. So without doing the sales tax, you can't afford it. But even with the 15%, you're paying $339.96 after the discount, but with a 8.25% tax, which is the same as paying that amount plus 8.25% more, which again is 100% plus 8.2%, which is 108.2%, you're going to get $368.01, which means you are $18.01 short, guys. You cannot afford the computer with this straight amount. Maybe you can borrow some money, maybe you can't, but just with this amount of money, you cannot afford the computer even with the discount. All right, I'm done. Bye, guys.